Hi, and welcome to Genetics Decoded. I'm your host, Sharon Palmer. Today, we're going to look at alcohol, specifically at how alcohol impacts on our rate of aging. Now, there's a lot of you out there who will be drinking. Some of you might be light drinkers, some of you might be heavy drinkers, some of you might be binge drinkers. Have you ever really thought about how that intake of alcohol is impacting around your health, or even that it could cause this rapid aging? We're going to look today at how your genetics is interfacing here, looking at, where do you need to kind of keep your threshold levels to? Like, if you drink below a certain level, will that help to protect you? Or if you drink too much, and how much is that? Where do you need to kind of draw the line around your alcohol intake? So join us today as we look at alcohol and aging. Today we're going to look at the role of alcohol and causing rapid aging. And I think the timing is perfect for this today. Is as I'm recording now, today is the footy grand final here in Australia, and there will be a lot of drinking that will be taking place today. I know that we've got a number of listeners over in the US, and you might not have any idea what our grand final is like, but think of your Super Bowl. That is the equivalent that we have here. I lived in the US for 10 years, so I'm very familiar with good Super Bowl parties. Still have no idea about a single rule. And for all of you from the UK, it is your Premier League that would be exactly the same. But here in Australia, the footy grand final is a big, big deal, and there will be an enormous amount of alcohol being consumed. And what we see, the research shows us that the amount of alcohol that we drink has a direct impact on our rate of aging. And I looked and I thought, well, if alcohol is causing us to age more rapidly, how much are Australians drinking? And in fact, they're drinking a lot. So it's not just on these special occasions that we're drinking. We tend to be drinking a lot most days of the week. There's quite a lot of different studies that have been done out there, but across the board, Australian drinking rates are always one of the highest in the world, and that's certainly nothing to aspire to. There was an international study done as they looked at some selected countries, and they looked at the rates of how frequently people got drunk over the course of the year. And Australians took the number one position, that we are getting drunk more than anyone else in the world. And if we look at the frequency of that, on average, it is happening 27 times a year. And you all know, right? There's only 52 weeks out of the year. That means about every 2 weeks. And that level of drunkenness over the course of the year is double the global average. And if we're drinking a lot of alcohol, and we know that alcohol is impacting on our rate of aging, then I think it's really important information to know, because if you're drinking too much, it could absolutely accelerate your rate of aging, and that's not going to have good outcomes across the board. We know that alcohol is not good on so many other aspects of our health, but we are seeing it's increasing this rate of aging. And what we're going to do is we're going to go in and explore that today. Well, if alcohol causes aging, what is the pathway or the mechanism by which this happens? And what we know is that alcohol impacts on these things called telomeres. Now, some of you may have heard of telomeres, but go, oh, I don't know, I've heard of them, but I don't really know what they do. Others of you may go, never heard of these things called telomeres. So let's have a look at what telomeres are. If we look at our chromosome, our telomeres sit on the end of our chromosomes, and they are really there to protect the DNA and to keep the DNA healthy, to help it when it's replicating and dividing. And our telomeres are the longest when we're born. So we're born, and this is when our telomere length is long. And as we begin to age, our telomeres get shorter and shorter and shorter. And short telomeres are not good. Researchers use telomere length as a sign of biological aging. So the shorter the telomere, the greater the biological age. And you don't want your telomeres to be short because it really begins to interfere with that cell replication. Now, when your cell divides, we lose about 50 to 100 base pairs. So when we're getting this cell division to happen, we're not really good at reading the little bit on the tail. So we start to lose about 50 to 100 of these base pairs every time that cell divides, which is why we see this shortening. Now, 50 to 100 may sound like a lot, but if you've listened to some of the other podcasts, you will know that we have 3 billion of these base pairs. So 50 to 100 at each cell division is, it's not catastrophic, but some cells divide very, very frequently. And so we end up with these very short telomeres. Anti-aging researchers are really interested in telomere length. They're interested in things that support or help to lengthen telomeres, and they're also very interested in the things that shorten telomeres. So not just getting older, not just cell division, but some things like alcohol that can go in and shorten these telomeres. And that's why drinking alcohol is a problem, because what we do know is that it will lead to these shortened telomeres. And you might look and go, okay, short telomeres, no big deal. But we know if we look at a lot of the chronic diseases of aging, so things like Alzheimer's and dementia, cancers, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, they are all tied in and associated with this short telomere length. We want to really make choices that preserve our telomere length, and we want to be avoiding things that shorten them. And, our intake of alcohol is certainly within our control and can have a big impact on these telomeres. When we drink alcohol, we have to metabolize it out of the body. And we all have these, what they're called alcohol metabolizing enzymes. Their role is to take ethanol and convert it. The problem with alcohol metabolism is before you kind of convert it into water and things like acetic acid, you produce these really toxic byproducts. And it's these toxic byproducts that do a lot of damage to our body. Now, we're not looking too deeply today at these actual metabolizing enzymes and these production of these toxic metabolites, but to know that our rate of alcohol metabolism really varies from person to person depending on the activity of these enzymes. Now, in some people, based on their genetics, we know that conversion of ethanol into these toxic metabolites is increased at a rate of about 7,000%. So you can see our ability to metabolize alcohol, our response and our fallout from alcohol can really vary from person to person. But when we're looking at the impact of alcohol on our telomeres and shortening it, it is really the genetic variances in these alcohol metabolizing enzymes that are playing a major role. Now, some of those genetic variances, we may be lucky and just have longer telomeres. So this is a plus. Some of us are born with, or have the capacity to have longer telomeres. Other people have other factors that can lead to shortened telomeres. But we also know that based on these genetic variances, that for some people, that the minute their alcohol intake goes above a certain threshold, it starts to have a really negative impact on these telomeres. It leads to this shortening of these telomeres. And again, you don't have to guess. If I'm telling you this information, you go, oh, I wonder is that me? Am I lucky enough to maybe have these longer telomeres, or do I fall into that category where drinking too much is going to shorten my telomeres and maybe I need to really adjust my intake? And your genetics allows you to very easily answer these questions today. I know those answers for myself. I certainly fall into that category where drinking alcohol above a certain threshold is going to rapidly lead to shortening of telomeres. Now, I'm lucky as I don't drink much at all, but I'm also very aware that, when I do drink is to make sure I'm not going above these threshold levels. So getting your genetics allows you to go, how much impact could alcohol have, and what is the amount that I need to keep my intake under? And, if I say to you, well, alcohol can shorten my telomeres, your question is, how much alcohol? Because what you don't want to hear, right, is that it's none. You don't want me to say, well, you can't just drink it all because the minute you drink, it's going to shorten your telomeres. And you'll be very pleased to hear that, it's only drinking above a certain threshold. So people who are light or moderate drinkers are not going to have the same kind of risk here. But we see that magic number is having more than 29 units per week. That is what the research is showing us, is that if people were drinking more than 29 units per week, this is where we started to see the risk around shortening of telomeres. Now, don't take that information, don't kind of take that 29 units and think that that's across all aspects of alcohol and health. That 29 units was just for shortening telomeres. There may be a lot of serious health impact from drinking less than that 29 units. But what we're going to do, we're focusing today on these telomeres. And when I say to you 29 units of alcohol, you probably go, how much is that? And so let's put that into terms that make sense from like when you're going out and buying a drink, like how can we quantify this in the amount that you're drinking? I've got a list here for you, and that way, it won't matter what kind of alcohol you're drinking, you'll start to get a really good sense of just what is a unit of alcohol. So we know that we kind of got to get below this 29 units. If you like to drink spirits, so maybe you're a whiskey drinker or you have a gin or you like a shot of vodka, one shot of vodka or spirits is considered 1 unit. Now, when you go out and you're buying a drink, they're going to make sure that you just get 1 shot. They don't want to give you more than what you're paying for. But if you're making your own drinks at home, it is quite likely that you're putting a lot more than 1 shot in. So again, get yourself a little measuring cup. Find out exactly what looks like 1 unit and then go, when I pour my own drink at home, it's more like 2 or 3. What we want to know is kind of, just how much you're drinking, not an estimate and not you kind of, downplaying it like, oh, I'm sure it's just 1. I don't want to know what the real amount is. But 1 unit of a spirit is considered that 1 unit. If you're a wine drinker, a normal glass of wine, a small glass of wine, would be considered 125 mils. That is the equivalent of 1.5 units of alcohol. Now, if you've got a normal bottle of wine, which is 750 mils, 125 mils would mean that you would get 6 servings out of that bottle of wine. I know a lot of people who go, oh, if I share a bottle of wine, it's 2 standard drinks. That is not the case. So if 125 mils equals 1.5 units, you would get 6 servings out of a bottle of wine. And again, when you go to a restaurant and they pour you wine, I always look and go, gosh, there's like so little in the glass. When I'm at home, I will be a little bit more generous. And so if you're pouring a larger glass of wine, so 250 mils, that's going to be the equivalent of 3 units. And that means that if you were looking at a bottle of wine, you would be getting 3 glasses out of it. So again, you've just got to work out how much you're drinking, how much of that bottle of wine. If you're drinking a whole bottle of wine to yourself, and I know a lot of people do, is that would be considered 9 units. If you're liking a beer, 1 can of beer will be 2 units. If you're having a pint of beer or cider, that is going to be 3 units. And if you're drinking kind of those pre-mixes in a can, that is 1.5 units. Now, sometimes we might have, a whiskey and Coke, or we might have a glass of wine. What I would really encourage you to do is kind of either pause this or go back and watch it again and take the time to kind of go, what is my drinking level? Because a lot of people don't. If we look at the statistics, a lot of people grossly underestimate the amount that they're drinking. And what I want you to do is be honest here. You're not needing to disclose. You're just kind of anonymous. You're at home, and work out how many units per week on average are you drinking. Because we know that if it's 29 or above, this is where you'll start to get this negative impact around telomere length. But as I mentioned, you might have a lot more negative outcomes even drinking less than that. When this research was done, what they looked at was they compared people who were drinking 29 units or more, and they compared it to people who were drinking no more than 6 units. So let's see if we can, what I would recommend is trying to get your alcohol intake to no more than 6 units per week. So let's look at how that would equate into how much you're drinking over the course of a week. So if you're a wine drinker, if you're having a glass of wine, if you were having a small glass, which is that 125 mils, over the course of a week, that would be 4 of those glasses. So that's not a lot. If you were drinking a large glass, which is the 250 mils, that would be 2 per week. And again, most people I know, I question a lot of patients is, having a couple of glasses is very, very easy to do. And that would be just, for one night out of the week. A lot of people come home and they'll have a couple of glasses every night. If you're drinking a can of beer, trying to keep below or no more than 6 units would be 3 cans of beer. And if you're drinking those kind of premixes, that would be equivalent to the 4 small glasses of wine. And if you're drinking a pint of beer, that would be 2 pints of beer. So that intake is really different to, trying to keep it below 29 as opposed to keeping it no more than 6 units. And I would think that a lot of people would find it quite difficult to stay to those 6 units. But, that's where I would be encouraging you to try and get your intake to, because this is where we start to see, very little impact around your health. The whole point of the podcast today is not to try and lecture you around your drinking habits, but to just bring your attention to the fact that alcohol has some really significant impacts around our health. And it is clear that going in and changing our drinking habits can have really significant impact around our health and well-being. And I think it starts with, first of all, understanding where your intake is and being very honest around calculating that and trying to keep below these threshold levels. I see a lot of patients who go, I don't drink regularly, but when I drink, I really drink. I go out and I binge drink. And it's not uncommon to see people having, sometimes 10, 12, even more drinks at any one session. And we know that binge drinking is very damaging. What you don't want to do is kind of go, I only do that once every couple of weeks or once a month or once every couple of months. And so it doesn't matter because the rest of the time I don't drink. You want to really take away those sessions where you would consume that much alcohol. The other thing is a lot of people do these things called dry July. So they go, okay, I'm not drinking for the month of July. Some people find that easy to do, some find it very difficult to do. But if we look at the long-term impact of that around your health and well-being, it's going to be very minimal. If you do a dry July and then, come August, you're like, okay, I can hardly wait to go out and have a drink, and you go back to drinking at higher levels again, you've not really achieved anything from a health point of view. If that dry July acts as a catalyst for change, like it helps you to break habits and behaviours, and then once that dry July finishes and you start to drink but at very different levels, again, that can be very, very meaningful. But, the biggest impact will come from, looking and keeping your intake below certain threshold levels. And if we look at the current Australian standards, what they're recommending is that, to have no more than 2 standard drinks on any one day, and trying to build in 3 or 4 alcohol-free days per week, but certainly not going over more than those 14 standard drinks. But the way that the research is moving is that we will probably end up having no safe drinking limits. It will be, like none or, very, very little. And one of the really big impacts around drinking from a health point of view is this increased risk of cancers, and, very broadly across the whole body here. And so if we look even just, a decade or so ago, it was considered men were told that they could have 4 standard drinks per day, and that was okay. That has now been dropped down to 2, and we'll probably see this down regulation over time. So for any of you who do enjoy a drink, go in and work out just how much you're having, try and get it to below these threshold levels, and knowing that, keeping your intake down can have a really positive impact around the rate at which you age. Please note that the information presented here today is just for general information. It is not to be taken as medical advice. If you're interested in going down the pathway of clinical genetics and you're not sure where to start, please feel free to contact us at iDNA Health. We have patients all over the world. We can post kits anywhere. We can also take your 23andMe and Ancestry data. If you enjoyed the podcast, please remember to go in and like and subscribe. It certainly supports what we're doing here, and we release a new episode every Monday. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. If we've started to increase your interest around clinical genetics and you think you would like to find out a little bit more, please feel welcome to reach out to us at iDNA Health Clinic. We're proud partners of this Genetics Decoded podcast. It's a real opportunity to get in touch with us and find out how you could go down this pathway yourself. If you liked the podcast, enjoyed it today, please go in and push all the buttons, like and subscribe. It really does make a difference and supports what we're trying to do here. We have a podcast release every Monday, so keep a watch out. All of our topics are around genetics and health, and we would love you to join us every week.